murder in the desert, a mysterious motorcyclist, a secret affair, and a deep appreciation for the Book of Psalms.
It sounds like a Dateline podcast to me.
We're doing a full recap of Deadly Mirage, a podcast with as many metaphors as a Dalmatian has spots, as a cat has lives, as a thing with a lot of things has that thing.
That's on this episode of So Much Crime.
So little time. Jeff, while you were sitting scripting that opening piece, thinking of all the metaphors, you know, in that in-between time where you've written one metaphor and you're trying to find another one, what's the next one you're going to put in there? Do you know what you could be doing in that time?
Thinking of similes?
Similes?
Yeah.
Similes?
A metaphor that uses like or as. Is that you call it a simile? Is it French?
Simile. I don't know. That's just what it's called.
Tomato, tomato.
Well, while you're trying to think of a metaphor or as a simile, you could actually be going to patreon.com/so much crime, so little time. Do you know what you'd find there?
I guess I'd probably find some outtakes about similes.
Similes, similes, potatoes, patatas, some early release episodes, bonus content, and you'd get to support this show, which really, it just gives you the warm and fuzzies.
What does it feel as good as?
A good whiskey.
Patreon.com/so much crime, so little time.
Welcome to So Much Crime, So Little Time. I'm Dee.
And I'm Jeff. And before we start, just a quick warning.
Warning.
This episode is going to have spoilers for Deadly Mirage. We're going to discuss the whole series here.
What's Deadly Mirage? Did you say podcast? What's a podcast? Okay, let's slow it down. If you're new to this story, check out our preview episode on this show. It's the one before this one in your feed.
You'll also find a link for Deadly Mirage in our show notes.
You're just delighted with yourself.
A little bit.
As I was reading it, I could tell you were delighted with your writing. It's so funny. Okay, let's recap a little bit about the podcast and also about what we heard in episode 1. So this podcast was released in December 2024. The host is Josh
Mankiewicz.
It has 6 episodes between 30 to 40 minutes in length. But what is the story? What did we cover in episode 1, Jeff?
Yeah, in the first episode and in our preview episode, we talked about this place called Silver Lakes, which is in the Mojave Desert in Southern California. It has been described as the happiest place in the high desert.
Because there's so few places in the high desert, do you reckon?
I mean, that's possible. We learned about this group of adults, like mostly 30-somethings, that called themselves the Wolf Pack. And one member of this group, Rob Limon, was working as a mechanic at a rail yard, and he was murdered in August of 2014. There was video footage of a possible suspect, a guy on a motorcycle, and we learned that he was shot with a large caliber gun. We also heard from his wife, Sabrina. The police were questioning her about basically trying to get to a possible motive, asking if he had any known girlfriends, if they had an open relationship, and that's pretty much episode 1. So, D, we listened to the rest of this. We listened to the other 5 episodes. What are your thoughts? Where would you like to start?
I don't know. This is going to be a tough one for me because I suppose I have a question for you, Jeff.
Okay.
How many times did you fall asleep listening to this podcast?
I mean, I didn't fall asleep. I definitely zoned out listening to this podcast. And I'm going to be perfectly honest. In our preview, we talked about not listening to it more than once. Like usually I listen to the previews a couple times, sometimes 3 times. I think this one I listened to 3 times. And I vowed to only listen 1 time to the rest of the episodes. And I kept that promise. And I want to tell you that my notes from this series include a handful of things on episodes 2, 3, 4, 5. I have like 2 lines, including an upsetting thing about a dog. Episode 6, I got as far as writing down the title. And then I kind of drifted away. How about you? Did you fall asleep?
I didn't fall asleep, but I finished the podcast and I was like, what? I don't know. Like it didn't engage me, and it should have. Like it was a really interesting story. I don't know whether it's the format. I don't know.
I was engaged with it through episodes 2 and 3, I think. This is where we were sort of getting into who was that man on the motorcycle. We learned about this guy, Jonathan Hearn, who was a firefighter who it turned out that Sabrina was having an affair with. And they met at Costco. I'm down for a Costco story. A Costco
romance.
Meet cute turning into murder. Oh, God, no. I was writing down the terrible metaphors and similes for a while, including as handsome as a tall glass of milk. Jonathan had blue-gray eyes as bright as high beams. And then something was as serious as a heart attack.
Yeah, I have that one.
Yeah. Also, I wrote down from episode 3, give the wire a coochie coo, which you can't unhear
Tickling
that.
the wire.
Tickling the wire. Yeah.
I didn't love that.
So tickling the wire. So there was a wiretap on a phone that was being used between Jonathan and Sabrina. And so even though I watched all 5 seasons of The Wire, and maybe at some point they made reference to this, I do not remember them ever referring to the phrase tickling the wire. It's a cool concept, though.
Yeah.
Do you remember what it is?
Yeah. It's when they ask someone a question, or basically they make up something to get the people that they have the wiretap on to say something. So, for example, the lead detective called Sabrina and said, we have something, we have saliva, and we're sending it to get tested. Like, this is big news. And then they hear her on the wiretap, like, calling Jonathan immediately to kind of say to him, like, this is happening. Or they call her in for questioning because, there's more coming out. And then she rings him, and it's like kind of bait. It's baiting her to, ring and speak about the event.
Tickling the wire, though, is, I think, an unpleasant phrase.
Yeah. I don't like it.
I also want to say, I watched all 5 seasons of The Wire. Great show. I've watched the first season multiple times. As much as that show was about sort of the frustration and tedium and complicated police work that goes into an investigation like this, and oftentimes it didn't lead to what we were hoping it would lead to in The Wire, the show. Here, I was like, great, they put this wire on this phone. There were 7,000 calls and texts from April to October, including 2,000 texts in the weeks leading up to the murder. And yet they still didn't have anything incriminating in any of those?
Yeah. It was kind of weird. Like, the most incriminating thing they had really was, like, the romantic chit-chat.
Well, and a lot of this pseudo-religious bullshit, which...
I know. Do you know, as I was listening to that, I was like, this is BS. Like, this is not, like, how anyone speaks, surely. Like, let's pray to God and make sure that he gives us the strength to get away with this, basically, is what he was saying for a lot of it. I'm like, this is weird. Yeah. I wasn't overly shocked when he came out and admitted that he wasn't actually that religious, and Jonathan was like, he's faking it.
But I think, you said something earlier that I think is worth talking about for a second. So the story itself is interesting. And I was thinking about this, like, if you step back from the story, you've got this couple that got together when they were very young. I think Rob was like 21 or 22 and Sabrina was like 18 or 19 when they got together. I think they met in college or something like that. They get married. Yeah. They have a couple kids. They move to this place, Silver Lakes, in the desert. And then, they're 10 to 15 years into their marriage. Sabrina, they experiment with an open marriage at some point, or they have like a thing with a whole nother couple that I feel like that sort of sets them down this path of potentially cheating. She gets this job at Costco. In walks this 22-year-old super smart firefighter who they start this romance. They have this affair. And then apparently, allegedly, although I think they're both in prison now, so they conspire to murder her husband and get together themselves. That's an interesting story. I think we're criticizing the delivery of it. I think I refer to it as like the sort of like McDonald's of true crime in the Dateline delivery of this, where it's sort of like you kind of see how it's all going to come together. You know what to expect. It's kind of bland. It's there. There's a cheeseburger here. Is it a great cheeseburger? Is it an interesting cheeseburger? No. But
it kind of ticks all the boxes, but nothing else.
Yeah.
The basic boxes.
Right. And if you go to McDonald's in some other city, you listen to another Dateline podcast, it's going to have a lot of these same elements told in the same way, which I think to your point about falling asleep, like I think there's a certain formulaicness to their delivery.
Yeah, I suppose as well, it was storytelling. It was just like narration. It wasn't as if there was like probing questions or really trying to get anything new and shiny. Like I'd say if you read, an article about this murder, you'd get all the main bits that you got in the podcast. I often think though the podcast should go into a little bit more depth or like try to get something that makes them stand out, and I just don't think they had that here. Like for Pam, the thing about Pam, they were brought into the story themselves. Like they were trying to interview
producers, the Dateline producers.
The producers were, and they were trying to interview her, and then she used the main producer's name when she was actually trying to dupe someone else. That was so interesting, and it kind of gave it this unique twist.
Yes.
But here, it just was.
It was more superficial.
It just felt
than
like
that. Yeah.
It was definitely superficial, and it didn't go deep anywhere.
Well,
like nowhere at all. It was literally like tickling the surface, and that was it. And then it's like it's not going deep. And like, I think one of the strengths of this show for me was like it was short. I didn't have to invest a lot of time into listening to it. It was fine. But one of my frustrations is there's so much more I want to know. Someone doesn't just decide one day to kill their husband or to get someone else to kill their husband.
Yeah.
So what, like there has to be more to this than what they told us. There has to be more.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we didn't really... There were things alluded to in the trailer and in the first episode that never really were fulfilled. Like even like about this wolf pack and kind of what their whole deal was. Like I think it was teased as going to be something more salacious, more scandalous. And it ended up being pretty boring and pretty ordinary. Because I was thinking about the thing about Pam too. And I think in addition to what you said, I think what you said is true. But I think the other part of that why Pam worked better was that story was way weirder.
It was way weirder, but this story was weird and wild enough that more could have been made from it.
Was it that? Like, I was thinking about all of... You know what pops into my head? I don't know if you're going to get this reference. Are you familiar with Wayne's World?
Yes.
Do you know Wayne's World 2?
Older brothers. Ooh.
With Kim Basinger. It's the one where they put on the festival. And it has Christopher Walken.
I think you have referenced this before in a podcast that we recorded.
Wayne's World 2?
But anyway, go on.
Okay. I want to give a shout out to my dad who took me to Wayne's World 2 when I was a kid. And I think sat there thinking, what a dumb movie this is. And compared to Wayne's World 1, it's not the same high piece of art as Wayne's World 1. But
high piece of art.
One of the subplots of Wayne's World 2 is Garth, played by Dana Carvey, gets seduced by Kim Basinger at a laundromat, and they begin a relationship, and it turns out she really just wants him to kill her husband.
Mm-hmm.
And that was sort of a parody of such a old trope in movies and books, right? Like that's not a new story.
Yeah, but like here, what the new story here is like, we don't know why. Is it just for the money? Like, is it why? It was alluded to that she was saying, if I left him, like all of the wolf pack and all that I know, they'd all side with him, and
right.
I'd lose like all my friends and everything. I don't know. I just felt like there was more there that we could have got that we didn't get. Like that feels like such a like, maybe she wanted the money. Maybe she wanted people to have sympathy for her. It just feels bizarre. And then the fact that this whole like poison thing where she was going to poison him and it was going to be
The
better.
banana pudding.
But instead, he drives to this mad location that's really hard to find and shoots him, and they think that's the one that they're going to get away with. I don't know.
Well, okay. So on that point, I found it bizarre. So this guy he was 22 when he started the relationship. I think he was maybe 24 by the time the murder happened. Jonathan Hearn. And so he's the guy on the motorcycle who goes and kills Rob Limon. And he seems to be such a master criminal that they never get footage. Like so there's this pivotal moment where he's leaving the scene of the crime. He always has his helmet on, and like there's no, like he's wearing the whatever outfit he rides his motorcycle on, and they aren't able to like identify the license plate on the motorcycle. They aren't able to even positively identify what type of motorcycle it is. At least we don't hear. They have like the idea of the type of model it is, and then he has to go and get gas, and he manages to evade ever showing his face to any of the cameras at the gas station. They get him on camera at the gas station, but they still
but
can't.
that's because he keeps his helmet on.
I know, but like you'd think there'd be, like we heard in the first episode about this person walking away from the scene of the crime with a limp. The limp never turned out to be anything of some importance, did it?
Didn't he pretend to have a limp?
If he did, I missed that.
Oh no, the guy with the limp was a different guy altogether.
Who was that guy?
I don't know, I can't remember.
The other thing,
but here, come here, just before you move on, like with this petrol station, do you reckon, like, or gas station, do you reckon if the person behind the counter was like a young and attractive woman, he would have taken off his mask to flirt with her?
Ooh, the Luigi Mangione move. Yeah, interesting.
He was obviously so focused that he was like, no, I'm keeping this on.
What a callback.
Also, like, what? Like, where is anyone's remorse? Like, neither of them seem to have any remorse.
No.
Like, at all.
Have you seen, I don't know.
Even in the phone conversations were so disgusting. I'd say it was so distressing for Rob Limon's family to listen to that.
Yeah. I looked up what kind of, because I zoned out in the last episode, I had to go and look up what really happened in the last episode where we hear about Sabrina getting charged and sent to prison. So I stumbled across her mugshot, and she looks kind of delighted with it. Like she's smiling. Like it's one of those mugshots where it's like, do you know that there's a mugshot, right? Like you're going to prison and you're under arrest for murder. I don't know. Yeah, I have questions. Yeah, the lack of remorse is. Oh,
she does. She looks delighted with life.
Yeah, we'll throw that up on Instagram, I'm sure. The other thing I wanted to ask about was, okay, so there was this element that does get a little bit of attention in the story. So when Jonathan Hearn meets Sabrina, he is 22 years old. He's a firefighter, and he's never had a girlfriend before. So this is his first girlfriend. Which, I don't know. So you're a firefighter. You never have a girlfriend. You're apparently quite smart. And this is what happens.
Yeah.
That's an angle of this story of like, guy makes it 22 years without being in a relationship and then meets this woman at
Kills
Costco.
For one.
At Costco too. So, okay, one angle of this is this guy doesn't have any game to get a girlfriend in any situation, and then he picks up a woman at Costco? Or was this
Maybe
her?
he was just waiting for the love of his life.
Sure. Or was this her saying, here's a guy I can manipulate in Kim Basinger, Wayne's World 2 style?
But like, this is what I'm saying, that we don't get even that question. Like, that isn't even posed as a potential here. Like, it isn't. And also you have to remember, like, was he the one who was manipulated? Like, he was the one throwing like Psalms and God and all this crap out there.
That's what I don't know. Who was manipulating whom?
I don't know. But like, again, why wasn't that in the dialogue? Like, why wasn't it that question posed? This was like a storytelling. And maybe Dateline podcasts just aren't for me. Possibly.
But you liked the thing about Pam?
I did. And I think I liked 13 Alibis as well.
We did like 13 Alibis.
So, I don't know. It just felt very storytelly. It didn't engage me the way I feel like it should have, given the subject matter. And as much as we can criticize me and the rest of the true crime world that want to be engaged and entertained by true crime, judge me all you want. It's kind of what I'm here for. I'm just saying, like, if something like this ever happens to me, I want the person telling the story to be engaging and I want the format to be engaging. I don't want it to be boring.
Oh wait, are you, in this metaphor, are you Rob Limon?
I don't know.
Are you Sabrina? Are you Jonathan?
I could never be Sabrina.
Could you play them like violins and so that we're surprised that you don't have sheet music?
I literally would be so bad at like being any person in this story. Rob Limon seemed really sound. Maybe I'd be him.
He did, and he I don't know. That's the other thing is we almost didn't get enough of who this guy was.
Yeah, we didn't.
Because there were interesting details, like the fact that he had this shaved head and this tattoo on his head, but actually he was a really nice guy. Like he looked threatening. He looked scary.
Also, other thing that I feel like we didn't like get to grips with is, so she's having this affair, but they have an open marriage. But why didn't she tell him that she had this bit in the side if they had an open marriage? Like, I don't
think they had an
that.
open marriage. I think they had dabbled in an open marriage.
Hookups.
I also think this is one of those situations where they had an open marriage for him, and it was kind of a one-way street.
But that's only because she said
that's conjecture. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if that's actually true.
Like nobody else ever said that.
I feel like that is the stereotype of.
And the Bernatines, weren't they the ones that they had
like
fooled around
the wolf
with?
pack.
The Bernatines had said like they were both in on it. So I don't know. I think what struck me most about Sabrina was it was said when we were kind of introduced to her, possibly in episode 2, that, you know, she wasn't into a lot of things, but she kind of just went along with it. She kind of was a bit of a people pleaser. And I'm like, whoa, like wait, like what a way to like pivot your people pleasing ways and be like, you know what, I'm not going to people please anymore. I'm just going to kill you.
Bit of a leap.
Like what a bizarre turn of events.
I don't know.
Like, because maybe she felt like she had been manipulated through the years. Maybe she felt like Rob always made the decisions and she just went ahead with it. But if that's the case, you need to speak up and say, this dynamic isn't working for me now that I'm a grown ass woman. I was like a child when you met me, but now that I'm older, like this isn't working for me. Instead, it's like, oh, I have an idea. Let's kill him.
But don't you think? Okay, so sure. But again, this was a couple that got together when they were effectively children. They were like, she was 18, and then they, you know, she meets this guy when she's 18. They get married. They have 2 kids.
Sorry, when did you meet your wife? Like I was 20 when I met my husband.
I'm gonna say 22-ish. Like I knew her before, but like really didn't know her until 22.
Yeah, so I was 20. It's no excuse. They got into a very serious relationship and she was a people pleaser for a while, and people change and you have to voice those changes and have communication. Like I
mean, I haven't seen your husband in weeks.
What is he called? The Canadian boyfriend.
And you do go to Costco, right? So
I do.
Also, as an aside, I want to say there was a period in my life where my schedule of when I would go to the grocery store, to Safeway, coincided with when the local fire department would go. And so you'd always know it because they drive the fire truck to the Safeway in case there's a call. And so when I would take my
in case there's a call or to pick up women.
Why not both? And so my son was always really excited because he loves fire trucks and he loves firemen, and like little boys, and I guess middle-aged women also do. Anyway, so you'd see the fire truck parked out front, and then you'd go in, and inevitably at some point you'd see the firemen walking around, and they'd be wearing their uniforms, they'd have their radios on, you know, their walkie-talkies or their little like shoulder radio things. And it's just funny how like they move through the store like firefighters, and people sort of stop and gawk, and it's like, these are heroes who walk among us. And like like a lot of people walk through a grocery store or a Costco. Like, I mean, I walk through a Costco like it's you know, I'm just trying not to get hit by a giant cart.
Oh my goodness. It's like you need indicators. There should be stop signs.
But it reminded me of how like people stopped and looked, and people like, you know, everyone who had a small child, you know, like they were so excited to see them. But even just like adults would be like, hey, cool, like firefighters are cool. Like I get that, but anyway.
One question I had for you was one of the reasons the Bernatines really were sus of Jonathan Hearn was because he made that phone call and was like, I need like forgiveness, etc. What was that all about? Is it about the fact that he had the affair? Was that what he was trying to do? Because it feels like he inserted himself into this investigation.
Yeah, it kind of, I mean, from the wiretap phone calls that we heard, it seems like they were somewhat aware of the suspiciousness of what they were doing. I mean, how could you not be? Even if they had nothing to do with this and it was somebody else entirely who committed this murder, they're obviously going to be suspects in this.
Well, not all the time. Think of the teacher's pet.
What do you mean?
I mean, he moved his girlfriend in with him like a day after his wife went missing.
Presume he would be, what he was doing looked suspicious?
Well, they weren't. They weren't.
But that was what was suspicious. So baffling about that story. I mean, I guess it was 1982 and it was Australia.
But I don't know.
But this is the 2000s in California.
The other wild thing I thought was on the phone calls, I felt like she was about to say stuff so many times to incriminate herself. And he kept saving her. Like saving her from outing herself on the phone. And I was like, oh my God, he must regret that so much given how like they both turned on each other then.
There was a part of being able to listen in on those wiretap phone calls, as well as when they would bring Sabrina in to question her and listening to those tapes, that like it was almost interesting. Like it was almost something really good and just never quite got there.
No, it really didn't. It was missing a bit of panache or something.
It ended up feeling like we were just as casual as swinging on grandma's porch. That's the last one I wrote down. I stopped after that. I do want to say, as my last thought on this podcast, while it was upsetting that we didn't get more on Rob Limon, the actual victim in the story, the second victim in the story was the dog that they tested the arsenic poisoning on. And I feel like that was casually tossed off, that Jonathan checked to see if the poison worked on a dog that he didn't like. And he didn't even confirm that the dog actually died. Like, the dog could have been sick and in pain, and he just said, well, the dog didn't come around anymore, so I presume it worked. I don't know, the cruelty to dogs. Right?
What an asshole.
You don't just go poison a dog like that.
Or shoot a man because you want to hook up with his wife. Like, maybe just don't. Maybe just don't. Like, if he had gone into a Safeway as opposed to a Costco, he could have picked up numerous women, I'm sure.
I feel like Costco is the least sexy store.
100%. Although there are a few people that will go around using like forklifts and stuff. That's pretty cool.
All right, see, in the end, worth your time?
Background noise, go for it. Like, enthralling investigation, probing questions. If that's what you're after, don't go for it.
I agree.
That's what I think.
No, there were parts in the first few episodes that I was interested in. I was intrigued, but I definitely drifted off in the last couple episodes, and just like, and it was almost like when it was made clear that like, hey, we never actually get anything on this wire, or they never actually like really admit to it in a way that's satisfying and exciting. I did have a quick update on the story that I don't think, or maybe this was in the podcast. Tell me if you remember this. So they're both, Sabrina and Jonathan are both currently in prison as of the recording this episode in 2025. It looks like Jonathan is eligible for parole in November of 2028. And Sabrina is eligible for parole in February of 2033. She is currently in the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla, California. He is in the Ironwood State Prison. So we'll see.
We shall see.
Before we go, if you enjoyed this discussion, leave us a comment. Let us know what your favorite metaphor was. Or simile. Was it The blue-gray eyes that were as bright as high beams? Was it being as handsome as a tall glass of milk? How handsome is a tall glass of milk? When you look at a glass of milk, is handsome the word that you think of? Let us know your thoughts. Leave us a comment. Give us a rating if you haven't yet. Tell a friend. Talk to your friends. Simile, metaphor, personification, onomatopoeia. What's your favorite?
Onomatopoeia. Sorry. Thanks. On a fancy tree-lined street in Virginia, a millionaire businesswoman and her daughter are found dead in their family home. Was it a murder-suicide or was it all staged? Let's find out when we preview Blood is Thicker, the Hargan family killings from CBS News. That's on the next So Much Crime,
So Little Time. So Much Crime, So Little Time is a production of Mind Glove Media. The executive producer is Paxton Caloriso. Our associate producer is Blythe Ty. Our theme music was composed by Vyacheslav Starostin. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to this show on your podcast app. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a review. Even better, tell your friends. To join the discussion, look for us on social media. Check out the show notes for all the links. Thanks for listening.